Hello, my fellow Alaskans. Today we're here with Kevin McCabe, who is running for House District 8. And introduce yourself, Kevin.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, yes, my name is Kevin McCabe. I live in Big Lake with my wife Lynn and 2 dogs and a bunch of chickens. And I'm running for representative for House District 8. District 8 is Big Lake, 2 precincts in Meadow Lakes, a little bit of Kinnick Fairview, and KGB Road from essentially from Clap all the way out to the end of Point McKenzie.
That's a pretty large area.
It is. It's a big district, one of the biggest in the state, actually. 22,000 voters or so, and growing, actually. So.
Wow. So let's get right on into this. We're entering into a new legislative season. Everybody's running for elections like you are here, and there's going to be a lot of issues if you get elected that you're going to end up having to face when you get into office. And one of the biggest ones, and this is where I'm seeming to find the biggest focus that most of what we need to be concerned about is we have a group out there that thinks they control our legislators and how they're able to vote. And that group is made themselves into what we call the binding caucus. And if for those that follow me, though, they know that I love to call them the illegal binding caucus, because everything about what they do is extortion, blackmail, you name the acronym that you want to slide into that little profile for what the binding caucus does. We have 60 legislators. 7 of them out there are basically telling all 60 how they are to vote, because if they join into this binding caucus, they basically are giving them their vote when it counts on the most major of the bills. Good example would be the House Bill 205, the state and capital budget that passed this past year. And the way the votes happened there on the first part of it, and then when they actually got into the CBR vote. A lot of different things that are available out there. So the big question of the day is, and I have this for everybody, and pretty much everything we're going to be talking about today revolves around the binding caucus, because we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in here in the state at this moment if it wasn't for that. So what's your feelings about being in a caucus versus a binding caucus?
I think we're all, at one point or another, we're in a caucus. I mean, if you look at politics in general, the big R after my name means I'm in a Republican caucus. That should be the majority in Juneau right now, because there are a majority Republicans both in the Senate and the House. So why aren't the Republicans in control? That is one caucus. The binding caucus, promising your vote before you have seen a bill, to me, is unethical. So there is zero chance that I would ever do that. I'm not going to promise to vote yes or no with a chair that I may or may not agree with a year from now on a bill that I haven't seen and that my constituents haven't seen. So I'm sort of fond of saying the time where we elected a representative, we sent him to Juneau in a boat or on a horse or however he got there. He couldn't communicate with us. We elected him based on his ethics and his morals and his principles. And then we sent him to Juneau and said, go forth and do what we want you to do. That time is gone. Right now, with all of the tools we have as legislators, as people to connect with each other, to connect with our constituents, we should be on Facebook Live, we should be on Twitter, we should be on email, we should be on any venue that our constituents want to use to communicate with them. So a binding caucus is to me a failed construct of a weak leader. There's no other reason. If you had a strong leader, there is no other reason. They shouldn't need a binding caucus. In fact, the legislature, in years past, there have been sessions where they didn't have a binding caucus because they didn't need it, because they had strong leader, whether it be the Speaker of the House or the Senate President. They had a leader that was strong enough to be able to coalesce people around the bill and say, convince people through debate and rhetoric, this is the way you should vote. And those people voted that way based on the bill itself, not on some promise that they gave at the beginning of the session.
And if their constituents didn't tell them that this is what we do not want you to do, your vote or their vote is not sold or ready to be the exact opposite of what they've been elected for.
Absolutely. It's, you say it's illegal. I might even, I don't know that it's illegal or legal. It is definitely, in my opinion, unethical.
Agreed. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be discussing, like I said, it does revolve around the binding caucus. Alaska's unique when it comes to the actual caucusing. You and I could caucus on a very good bill. We both have a great idea. We talk to a couple of other of our legislative friends and we say, hey, come join us on this bill. We would really love your support, and that's kind of a form of a caucus because we all got a consensus on a bill that we want to push forward. But if I was to personally strip out all the things that had made this bill appealing to you in the very beginning, under a regular caucus, you would say, "C'est la vie, thank you so much. This no longer meets my agreement. You no longer have a yes vote for me. My vote is now no." But under a binding caucus, you don't get that option to say no.
Right.
You would have to vote yes because that is the vote that the promise you had given to be a part of that caucus.
Right, and of course it's coerced because they say, okay, if you're not going to vote with us, then because I am the Senate President or I am the Speaker of the House, I control the number of points you have to hire staffers. So I'm going to take some of those points away because you didn't do what you said and vote with us. So that's where the unethical part of it comes in. It's not just that they boot you out of the caucus and say you can't play with the cool kids anymore. They actually take your ability to properly represent your constituents via staffers or the size of the office or even as petty as press releases, they take that ability away. And that's where the unethical part of it comes in. It's not just, hey, you don't get to play with us anymore. It's, you don't get to play with us, oh, and we are going to harm your constituents. That's wrong. It's totally wrong.
We've seen that a lot this last year. Senator Mike Shower, Senator Shelley Hughes, Senator Laura Reinbold, both as when she was a senator and a representative, and it has gone on through all of their terms. We've got people like Costello and Vance, too, that have also paid the cost for defying that binding caucus and doing what their constituents have asked them to do. They've lost committees, lost power, lost the ability to have any staffers to do any work for them. Virtually their voice of their constituents has been completely shut down. They're nothing more than just a token face sitting there holding a seat that has no voice anymore.
Sure, Senator Costello is a prime example. You know, not one is out there and as vocal as Senator Shower, Senator Hughes, or Senator Reinbold, but Senator Costello did what her constituents wanted her to do last summer when she came to Wasilla for the special session. Her constituents wanted her to do that, and she did that, and she suffered the consequences of an irate Senate president who punished her by removing her office, which was the the majority leader. And to me, that's just wrong. It's wrong, especially to Republicans.
Agreed. We've got certain things out there that the legislators are bills wise that you're going to have to address if elected. And these bills have they're still sitting in committees yet, but they're being in process, or they have already passed through committees and either they have completed through the House and are waiting for the Senate to take it up, or vice versa. They're waiting on the Senate has already finalized these bills and they have passed it on to the House, waiting for them to take it up. These bills are pending because of COVID-19 this year. If COVID-19 hadn't reared its ugly head, these particular bills wouldn't be I think they would still be an issue at this point, but not as big of an issue. The reason why I think they would not be as big as the binding caucus would have been able to help get the pass, even though I know technically the constituents that these people represent would have been appalled and flabbergasted by what they are trying to do. One of these bills is HB 300 and 306. Are you familiar with the bicameral PFD group?
I am.
Okay. Last year, it was in October, right in that area. They had met in Anchorage. They had a big conversation with the bicameral PFD group. They presented Alaskans with 6 different plans. Not a single one of these plans showed the PFD being inflation proof. That was not included in these plans. And they came out with this PFD budget tool. And I just want to point out one little thing about this tool. If you were to go and use their tool, and it takes in SB 26 portion automatically using this tool out of the permanent fund when it does its calculations. But if you're to take the permanent fund out of this tool, they had a $900 million surplus sitting there. I was actually floored. I thought I was wrong in what I was doing, and so I went and I took it to the more scholarly educated people than I consider myself to be. And they all were going they were just absolutely floored by what they were seeing, that here we have a surplus if we remove the permanent fund. So going by what their tool is, they're considering our permanent fund a tax. And this tax is our permanent fund is to be paid by taxes. No longer the statutory formula that has been used for decades to transfer that money from the earning reserves account, which is where the fund gets held in, and then we get our fair share paid out every year under the statutory formula. Then they introduced SB 26. Fill us in on your knowledge on SB 26.
So SB 26 was the root of the problem, in my opinion. SB 26 changed the words for the PFD from transfer to appropriations. So you remember, the legislature appropriates. That's our function. That's the function of the legislature, is to appropriate money. So once they remove that word transfer and change it to appropriate, now it becomes the legislators and the legislatures to do what they want with, instead of the governor or the PFD corporation simply transferring it. So changing that single word several times in, I forget the regulation, but changing that word several times is one of the biggest sleight of hands that I've ever seen perpetrated on the state of Alaska residents by sitting legislators. It's unconscionable that they did that. I think it needs to be repealed. It's the root of all the problems. I think you're going to talk about the spending cap and
Yes.
the fact that as the tool said, the spending cap, the PFD is going to be underneath the spending cap. So eventually, as we talked about earlier, sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, but
No,
the
go
spending
ahead.
is going to keep going and keep going and keep going, and then as it goes and we bump up against the top of that spending cap, the PFD is going to shrink and is going to shrink, is going to shrink. So a constitutional spending cap is an awesome idea, but it can't affect the PFD. So we either need to remove the PFD and put it above the spending cap if we want to continue to pay the PFD, or we need to repeal SB 26 and change it back to a transfer and not an appropriation. But
I'm confused here, really quick. Are you saying that SB 26 itself has its own cap right now?
no, it doesn't have its own cap. It's simply the fact that they changed the wording of how the money gets paid from the permanent fund corporation into the state budget, and changing it as to an appropriation. Changing that word transfer to appropriation is the root of all the problems. And if we can get that repealed and get it changed back to the historical, the way it was before SB 26, I think that's a large part of our problem. And then you could put a spending cap in, no problem, because the PFD would not be, or the dividend, I'm sorry, would not be underneath it.
Understood. And so bringing up spending cap, we do got a Senate bill out there that's Senate Bill 104, and that is the spending cap bill. This is one of those that was delayed because of COVID. Otherwise, it would have got pushed a lot further. And you can find the video on YouTube, on my page, of either Facebook or on YouTube. And they talked about imposing a spending cap and making it a constitutional one, just like you were describing there. in their discussion, they said we're going to impose a $6 billion cap on our spending. But they were putting the permanent fund dividend underneath the cap. And we'll just give a hypothetical using last year's, close to last year's numbers or this year's numbers of what they've decided to do for the budget. They said that we're going to spend $5 billion on the state. We're going to take that $5 billion, we're going to pay health and social services, K through 12, university, our prison systems, you name it, anywhere that budget money would normally go. This is what that $5 billion is for. And that leaves $1 billion to pay our permanent fund dividend with, because it's not to exceed that cap. We've seen how well our legislators are when it comes to spending. There is no such thing as reduced spending. It's always increase, 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 year after year after year. That $5 billion is just like you were describing here just a little bit ago. It's going to go from $5 billion to $5.2 billion to $5.5 billion. Now we're on down to about $500 million for our permanent fund, and that could be in just 2 short years. If you go by what they're doing currently right at this moment, that'll actually be within 2 years from now, there will be no more permanent fund dividend being sent out to Alaskans. If this bill was to get in front of you, because like I said, this is a Senate bill at the moment, it hasn't been presented within the House as far as I know. And if this bill was brought into the House, where would you stand on it? I think you've already really touched upon it, but just kind of finalize for the bill itself.
Well, so, a spending cap, I am for a spending cap. We have a spending cap right now. Not too many people know that, but we have one.
We do.
But it's so high. I mean, we put that in place when we had lots and lots of money, and
when oil was $100 a barrel.
We could never imagine that we were going to that we would ever get close to a spending cap, or if we did, it doesn't work. So we need to have a realistic spending cap on our budget. But I think we need to solve the PFD thing first. Before that exact thing happens, before the PFD is part of the spending that is taken into account as part of the spending beneath the spending cap. So my idea, which is a little different than what most people say, I don't care how much the PFD is. I frankly don't care what we do with it. Our Alaskans who own the PFD, who own that dividend, need to have a vote on it. The legislators and legislatures of the past should not have any ability to change the PFD without a vote of the people. That's my some thought. It belongs to the people.
Like they did back in 1999, that was the first attempt that the legislators at that point had ever tried to touch the money that belonged to us. And they let us vote on it. It was 83% popular vote saying, don't touch it, hands off our PFD.
So think about what a dividend is. If you buy a stock that pays a dividend, a certain dividend, you look at stocks and you say, oh, I want to buy this stock because it pays $2 a share dividend, whatever, right? If they stop paying that dividend, you sell the stock or you fire the board of directors, right? So we, Alaskans, have a certain expectation that that dividend belongs to us because we have purchased the stock by moving to Alaska. So we have a choice. If we don't want the dividend paid, then, or if we no longer want the dividend paying stock, we either move from Alaska or we fire the legislators that can't seem to understand that the dividend belongs to the people. We gave it up in return for becoming a state. In 1959, we did not have enough people in Alaska to become a state. We didn't have enough people. We were not going to be allowed to become a state. And as part of negotiating with Congress to become a state, we gave up our mineral rights. We didn't really give them up. We made them collective, owned by all Alaskans. 108 million acres, I believe, of land that belongs to Alaskans and is in private hand. We get the dividends from the minerals that are underneath that land. That was part of the deal for becoming a state. And now our legislature wants to take that away from us and take that dividend away from us. And I think it's wrong. The people need to have a say in it. The people need to vote on it. And that's one of the things that I will work towards, in addition to repealing SB 26 and and a few other things I suspect we're going to talk about.
They all go hand in hand, don't they?
They do.
You're going to be walking into one hell of a, excuse my French, a shitstorm here real shortly. The House has already passed 3 different bills. The vote should, again, just like with the other YouTube video, you can find these things all on my Facebook page. I'm consistently sharing those posts because to make sure Alaskans really know what's going on. We've got House Bill 300, House Bill 306, and HCR 13. They're all basically the same bill. H3 300 and 306 have been combined into one bill, but unless you go and research what 306 was, you do not get a full picture of what HB 300 has turned into. Remember we were talking just a second ago about the bicameral PFD group. Those 6 plans, that's what HB 306 is. HB 306 is those 6 plans of them trying to discuss how the future of what our permanent fund dividend is going to look like. HB 300 is a finalization of those 6 plans of we're now going to pick a plan and we're going to move forward with that plan from here on out. HCR 13 is a resolution to help put it into the Constitution that this new plan of theirs is how what the statutory PFD is today, SB 26 is currently at, which are both valid laws on our books, but they choose to which laws they want to follow and which laws they don't want to follow. And if we were to follow all of the laws that we have, we would have seen a $3,000 permanent fund dividend this year. We would have got the $1,304 that was removed from our permanent fund dividend last year. If you take all 5 years and combine them together, we're roughly around $7,700 per Alaskan. Fun fact, and you are the first person I'm going to bring this up with, we have $6 billion in earnings this year, above and beyond what the earnings of the reserve, permanent fund reserve was last year. $6 billion. It would only take $5 billion to repay back every penny they have stolen from us since day one, under Walker taking the very first one up to current. That $5 billion, that still leaves $1 billion of extra earnings that they have in there just in profits just this year. So whenever I hear the excuse, oh, we can't afford to pay you back what we have taken from you, it's not because it's not there. It's not that the permanent fund's not making the revenue. It's just that they chose not to do it. They like to keep the money for themselves. This is the easiest way to put it in a small nutshell. We brought up the bicameral PFD work group and their PFD-Budget tool, and how if you remove the permanent fund out of that, we had a $900 million surplus sitting there of revenue. It still is really confusing to me why we cannot be following our statutory formula as a transfer over and still can't pay our budget for the state. It's just, it floors me that they're able to do this, because their SB 26 gave them an extra 5% drop from the permanent fund beyond the 50%. It is, and for those that just are a little confused here, the ERA and that money that is brought in and that formula that is used over the 5-year span is a 50-50 split between the state and our government. They're already receiving that money already themselves every year, and they're taking 5% of what we're supposed to get extra on top of that. There's no real understanding of why they need to be taking, when they're already getting part of the budget comes from the ERA's reserve every year that they got before they changed the law.
Well, don't forget as well that before any of that happens, that 50-50 split that you're talking about, we already take royalties away from that we are getting to run the state government. So what you're talking about, we get a fraction of a fraction. So that 50-50 split is 50-50 split of 25% of the actual money that's coming into the state, right?
Yes.
So we need to make that very clear to Alaskans that, when we talk about 50-50 split, it's actually 12.5% and 12.5% of the money that's coming in to the state. The rest of it, the royalties and the leases, are used to fund our government. So this was set up. Remember, oil is a fixed asset. Oil is going to run out. So we set the permanent fund up as an endowment fund, essentially, or wealth fund, or a sovereign fund, or whatever you want to call it, whichever one of the terms you want to use. And it's supposed to take over when the oil runs out and fund our government. That's why we keep putting money into the permanent fund. The dividend is a portion that we take out of the fund to pay us, to give us some skin in the game, as Governor Hammond said, to sort of activate the militant ring of Alaskans, which is what you're seeing right now. We are getting upset with the legislators because they don't understand that they are taking away, eventually the entire permanent fund is going to be gone, and they want to start with a dividend. They want to start saving it so they can use it in future endeavors such as ski areas, which Senator von Imhoff told us at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Eagle River last winter. Ski areas, parks, all those things that Democrats, frankly, seem to be worried about.
Foundation that he deserves it.
Flower baskets and all that wonderful stuff. And a Republican, a conservative, wants to fund government and run government as small as possible. The smaller the government, the larger your liberties. That's my
government. I'm going to segue here just for a second. Government size. What makes Alaska unique for the size of our government compared to anywhere else?
As far as
size.
Well, you mean the size of the area or the size of the people?
The size of the amount of people that we have running government versus someone like, say, Montana, who's got similar populations to us.
Right, or even Texas, which has a huge population, and they have a legislature that meets once every 2 years. And so we have 60 people, 61 if you include the government, or the governor rather, that are sort of running the government for us. And in my case, District 8 has 22,000-ish constituents, and so I guess I'm not sure what you're getting at for the size per person, but
well, we have more government, and 1/3 of Alaska's employment is government.
So you're talking about
size of government, the actual amount of people that are working in our government.
Right. So the people that receive from the government in case of employment money or paychecks from the government is huge. It's more than a third. If you include the federal, the military here as well, in fact, it's almost half, from what I understand.
If you leave just from what I've been able to get going off of the census for the employment here in the state of Alaska, we got roughly around 60,000 people that are under federal and state employment that are out there, and this is out of 150,000 working Alaskans. And it's just absolutely amazing. They say that we got 300,000 working Alaskans, but it depends on what you classify as working. So if you go by the consensus of what's there on the Census Bureau, 60,000 Alaskans are dependent upon government for their paychecks because that's their job.
Right. So it's a net government income to them.
And state employees is 22,000. Right around there. 20,000 is what I see. It depends on who you watch. But if I go just by the census, it's at 22,000 people.
Right.
And that's just amazing. And why isn't this stuff in the hands of private contractors or private individuals?
Right. And when you think about it, we talked a little bit earlier about the thought that Alaska is in the hole financially. And maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but if you were to take the corporation that is Alaska and say, hey, judge, bankruptcy judge, we are in financial difficulty, we want to declare bankruptcy, we're going to go bankrupt, he would laugh us out of the courtroom because of the permanent fund, because of our budget, the CBR, the earnings reserve, all of that. He put it together. We actually have a lot of money. It's like Senator Shower says, your house is burning and you have 4 fire extinguishers, are you going to save one of the fire extinguishers and say, well, I'm going to save this for the next time my house burns? No, you're going to, now is the time when we need to, now's the rainy day. Now's the rainy day, folks. It's the reason that we have put the permanent fund in place.
So we got the binding caucus. I'm going to keep bringing them up throughout all of this. And every year when they passed the state and capital budget, they did it again this year, except for they added a new wrinkle to it compared to the year before. When it came time for the CBR vote, which is the Constitutional Budget Reserve, pre-Walker, when we're going by just 1 year before Walker, there was roughly $19 billion sitting in that reserve fund. And the time that Walker took office, they pulled out a big chunk of that money, and that had brought it to the $19 billion. And they pulled out a big chunk of the money to pay the pensions, state pension program that's out there, and Peers and Tears. So that they took $4 billion, I think it was, from out of their CBR to shore that up, which currently is sitting like $20 billion in the hole. And then they took the rest of it, that $19 billion, Walker took office, and they're sitting with less than $1 billion left in it. That Constitutional Budget Reserve is their version of our permanent fund dividend and our earnings reserve account. There's no real difference between that Congressional Budget or Constitutional Budget Reserve and our ERA, other than who it actually pays. So now they've got their hands into our permanent fund dividends ERA. If they couldn't keep their spending problem under control with that $19 billion and have whittled it down to $1 billion now, what's to stop them from taking our $65 billion that's sitting in there, and that's just 5 short years they blew through $19 billion. That we're talking 10 years or less for them to blow through the $65 billion that's sitting inside of the ERA at the moment.
So that's exactly why I'm running, frankly, Bert. It's a shame that you have to put the word fiscal or conservative in front of Republican anymore, right? Republican used to stand for smaller government and fiscal conservatism, and anymore you have to put those words in front so people understand that that's exactly who you are. So we need to stop spending money. We absolutely have got to figure out a way to stop spending money. And $17 billion in 5 years, that's there is no other word for it than that's an abuse of the trust that elected officials are given when somebody casts their vote for them, frankly, and that's.
And hence where the binding caucus comes in, which is why it keeps getting spent.
Sure. So keep in mind, the binding caucus is not, it's not its own animal. It's not, this is a pen. It's not something that we go in and collect when you walk in the door. The binding caucus is a group of people that we elected, a group of people that made this decision. So I think as constituents, we need to hold our legislators accountable. There's many things on Facebook, you're one of them, but many others are saying to their prospective candidates, will you accept the binding caucus? Will you vote for the binding caucus? However you want to put it, there's a number of ways to do it, but binding caucus is just a construct. It is not a living, breathing thing. It is created by a group of humans that, in my opinion, unethically decided to get together and follow one or maybe two people blindly into the abyss, not knowing that what they were casting their vote on, and agreeing to be punished if they didn't cast their. It's just wrong. They shouldn't be doing that. So it's sort of Kevin's opinion. I've been chastised for that opinion before, but
actually, no. You were a part of the Zoom meeting that happened on Monday evening.
I was.
And they were talking about the binding caucus, and Senator Schauer and Joe Miller and a whole bunch of other of our legislators throughout the entire state all joined together in this meeting. I think at one time we had close to 60 people all on the Zoom at the same time, and 20 to 30 of those was our actual legislators here in our state. And it was amazing listening to the different speakers there talk about, and it's like you're describing, it's not your pen. It's not like you're describing an actual entity, a creature or a monster out there but it is a consensus of getting rid of why you were elected in the first place. If we only wanted to have 7 people making the decisions for all 60, why didn't we just elect those 7 people and send them there, and the other 43 people that are down there, or the 53 other people that are down there in Juneau, just become legislators' aides? They do nothing but all the paperwork behind the scene, and here you go, you 7, you get to pass what we just handed you.
You know, I heard a legislator give a talk in Fairbanks where he basically accused those that had a problem with the binding caucus of cowardice. Whether he said it that way or not, I don't know. I didn't quite hear that, but maybe. Here's the deal.
It is what is in print right now, so you're not wrong there.
So here's the deal. In my opinion, the people that stand up and say, I will not do this, I cannot sell my vote before I see it, I cannot sell my constituents' vote before I see it, that's courage. That's not cowardice. That's courage. That's having the courage of your convictions. And we need more legislators and more people like you to talk about this binding caucus, not as a construct, but as a group of people that do not have the courage of their convictions. They do not have the courage to say, I will not sell my vote before I see what my constituents, to see what they want. I just won't do it. So,
to try to help bring those that don't understand what a binding caucus is or anything else like that, I would like to bring more of a national picture of it. Obamacare. The most famous line, and I will never forget it, is you have to sign it before you get to see what's in it.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. And that is no different than the way we are running our government here in Alaska right now. You have to sign it before you get to read what's actually in it. And it's just amazing that that's the type of government that we run right now.
Well, if you think about it, so you're a brand new legislator. You get to Juneau. You've heard somebody's name that is now elected the Speaker of the House, but you've never really talked to them. You've never really met them. You don't know what their values are. You don't know what their morals are. You don't know what their principles are. And the very first day they put this deal on a whiteboard that says, okay, here's the deal. We are all going to agree. If you want to be with the cool kids, you all have to agree that you will follow me, who you don't know and haven't met, and you have no idea of my principles, morals, values, etc. You will follow me blindly into the abyss. So if you agree, you get to play with the cool kids and you get a big office and 2 or 3 staffers. If you don't agree, you're over here in the minority. Doesn't matter that you're a Republican and you were elected as a Republican. You either have to agree to follow me or you're in the minority. Very simplified explanation of what a binding caucus is, but essentially, what's a new legislator gonna, how is he gonna react? He has to have the courage of his convictions. He has to say, wait a minute.
We saw a prime example of that this past year when we had lost the senator that had passed away in the Senate.
Right.
And we had to replace his seat, and first we had presented Rep. Laddie Shaw to be the first person to get in front and get the vote on whether to join the Senate or not. And they outright rejected him because he would not be a yes man, because they wanted him to sell his vote to the binding caucus, and that there's no better way to put it, because that is exactly what they were looking for. And they said, nope, you're not what we want, goodbye. And then they got Josh Reback, and he came over and he said, yes, I am your yes man, and they rewarded it for him. And how did they reward them? Those that were not yes men, like Senator Shower and Senator Shelley Hughes and Senator Vance at the time, they all of a sudden found committees being stripped from them. Senator Shower, who's head of the Armed Services and has got one hell of a military record behind him, is no longer the head anymore all of these things got handed to Josh, a freshman. It was his first year in office, basically, beginning of his second year. And he's never been a politician before this, but here's a freshman. And it was really telling when it came time for the votes.
So
he was always a yes when it was a part of their agenda, and a no. You could watch him lockstep with the Senate leadership there.
that's very frustrating. But even worse than that, what really frustrated me was to watch the treatment of Representative Shaw, who I know to be, even if I didn't know him personally, and I've met him a couple times, but even if I didn't know him personally, the fiber and the character of a Navy SEAL, to me, the way he was treated by the Senate president was just a total. I felt violated as a retired military guy. I felt personally violated by the way he was treated, the questions he was asked, and the pat on the head and go stand in the corner kind of attitude. Josh Revak is a retired military as well. I don't know, and I've never met Josh. It's frustrating that he is.
It has nothing to do with Josh at that point. It has
Right.
everything to do with the legislators that were voting for Laddie Shaw.
Right.
And it is, yeah, I agree with you. I was completely disgusted by what had come out of that. It was just jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
To think that we have people that call themselves Republicans, what they did to another Republican.
If you want to see, and this is a total bunny trail, but the character of a guy like Representative Shaw, he plants a flag on the top of a flat top mountain, right? Does a hike up there, puts a U.S. flag. The next day, somebody goes and steals it. Does he go try to find out who it was and whip their butts? No, he takes another flag up there, trots his butt up there to the top of Flat Top again and puts another flag up. Now that's the kind of guy that I would have loved to have seen sitting in the Senate right now. Somebody with the character to do that kind of thing. To me, I don't think the full story's been written on Senator Revak yet, but you can tell that Laddie Shaw would have been excellent in that job.
Still an open book there. Let's segue over into another section here, and we've got the COVID-19 crisis, the mask mandates that are out there right now, that at least in the Anchorage area anyways, you got to wear a mask. The rest of the state, it's open to your own interpretation on your comfort level. If you feel you don't need to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. If you feel that you need to be wearing a mask, wear a mask. I'm watching the outbreaks and the total numbers that are coming out, and I find it really ironic that the one area of the state that requires everybody to wear a mask is the one that, of course, that's exceeding in the numbers of reported cases. Where you look at the outlining areas where they're don't have that mandate that you have to wear a mask, like the Mat-Su Valley is a good example. We've had very few outbreaks out in this general region area, very few cases being reported in comparison. Yet our population levels is pretty comparable to Anchorage for the size and the area that we're in. Businesses have been open since day one. Just like Anchorage, they didn't have much of a stir-up, and I see it out here too. We didn't have much of a stir-up for the virus until they actually started doing testing. You could catch an airplane, and as long as it wasn't a commercial flight, you could walk right on into your plane, jump onto it at the Anchorage airport, fly to your rural village, get back out there, 2 weeks later, get back on the plane, fly back to here. Never once have you been tested. Do your grocery shopping, go back, get back onto that plane, go right back to the village again. No testing whatsoever. Then they started opening up the state, and they made testing mandatory to catch a flight. And I still believe you can actually walk by those people that do the testing, but then it requires what the state that you're going to walk into on whether or not you got to be camped for 14 days or not. So now we got the basic COVID kind of general consensus out there. And I'm not looking for any answers from you. As a subject that I would prefer to stay away from on a political level, because there's just not enough science out there and enough consensus on what we should be doing to back up in either direction. I believe if you got healthcare issues and you're one of those that they would classify at the at-risk, by all means, you should be wearing a mask. You should be demanding the people that come and see you to be wearing a mask. You're at risk. You should be taking those extra precautions. The reason why I bring up the COVID-19 and the mask policy is we are just a month away, basically, from our school system, K through 12 and early learning, from opening back up their doors again. And they have three different plans out there at the moment. This is going just by what Anchorage and the Matt Sioux have presented out there. So the more smaller areas, they're kind of going in their own consensus of what they want to do. The Kenai and Soldotna Borough District over there are pretty much following lockstep with the Matt Sioux and Anchorage to a point. None of us are following what Anchorage is doing. But we're following what the governor has mandated on a more or less level. So we are looking at open schools, 100%. We go right back to where we were, and the way it was before COVID. The biggest thing that we're hearing right now is a 50-50 split. You're going to have a chance to go to school and virtual classroom. And you'll spend 1 week at home and 1 week doing the virtual classroom, and then 1 week at school doing actual schooling. Those students that were in school that week will now go home the following week, and you just keep rotating throughout the entire school year until there's an outbreak. And then they have to shut the entire school down, completely do all the decontamination of the school, and everybody's back to 100% virtual learning. Or the third option, which is on the table at the moment, just do virtual classrooms. Completely forget about trying to reopen up our schools this year. Let's think about the safety of the people that are out there. We are in Alaska. A lot of our children are watched by grandparents, people that are in the age groups that are in the high risk areas, do have health problems and stuff like that. We're not unique. We're similar to what it is throughout the rest of the nation when it comes to those kind of statistics, but we're just a little bit higher, just like most things than the rest of the United States. We're higher. We've got more of an aged population out there that's watching younger children than what you do in other areas out there, because we've got a lot of single families, single mothers out there that are trying to raise kids. Their mom and dads are the ones that are helping them raise their kids, and this has become universal out there. Do you have any consensus of what you would think we should do with the schools? I mean, I'm a big avid, and you and everybody else that has watched the last couple of interviews that I've had here recently, I'm a big avid supporter of virtual classrooms. I think we should just completely open up our schools to where everybody should be on computer systems up to a certain point. We leave 80% of them closed down, the other 20% stay open. Those 20% become like home schools. They are there for the people that have disabilities that will not be able to learn through a virtual classroom type environment. People that need that extra help, no ifs, ands, or buts. Those that need extra help, like a tutor, would now have a home school to go to. If virtual classrooms are not able to get the extra help they need, they now have a physical location that they could go into. There are certain geographic areas in Alaska that this is not going to work. There's just not a good enough internet that's out there to be able to take care of that yet, or the infrastructure that's needed. But Alaska is rapidly changing in that direction, so it won't be very many years down the road before that is no longer an excuse that can be. By closing down the brick and mortar schools, we crunching the numbers, if we were to just do the 80-20 and it was to happen this year, which under my plan would take 3 years to actually implement fully, but to take that extra savings that you're no longer putting into those brick and mortars and reinvest it back into the education system. $700 million savings from what our current budget is, which is $1.3 billion a year that we are paying for our education here in Alaska for K through 12 and early learning. That $1.3 billion would be $600 million just for the teachers to operate and a very limited administration staff. And by limited, so we got 100 different districts out there that are to 503 schools. We would no longer need 100 different districts. We could roll them all into one district, one administration staff that's operating the virtual classroom school system and the few brick and mortars that are left out there. Maybe 3 if you want to break it apart by boroughs. Since we've got 3 boroughs in the state of Alaska, why not 3 school districts instead of 100. And take some of that money, that 700 million savings, and reinvest it. We could take 100 million of that and provide internet to everybody's home. I know if you're in the more populated areas, you can get unlimited internet for $100 a month. Parents would go ecstatic. I know that. So you're a parent of a kid, you now got a free internet connection to your home there that's unlimited. All they have to do is go purchase the little Roku stick, and they can be watching TV on the state's time through the school year. Those kind of things. There's a big bonus to it. The state would save a lot of money too, because it's not just one kid per house. There's sometimes 4 kids in the same house. So they're not going to have to pay for 4 internet connections. They're still only paying for just one. That would eliminate the problem. That's one of the biggest complaints I hear is the internet out there. These people can't afford it. Well, we're reinvesting the money. We can do it. We have Head Start programs out there that do our K through 12, that are not the K through 12, but they're there for the early learning
Pre-K.
portion. Yes. Why couldn't we take those 20% of the schools that we remain open, and those become a Head Start-like program for those parents that need to have daycare for their kids so that they can go to work? That's pretty much what the system is being used for right now. Parents go to work while their kids are at school, and then they have friends that watch their kids after they get out of school, or they get them into a daycare, but it's at a much, much reduced cost compared to what they are paying if they were in there full-time all day.
So there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. And the first thing let me say is you have to figure out. Let me start first with the COVID thing, where we were all in our houses from March on. I think a lot of parents learned that they can actually be homeschool teachers. They can actually teach their kids oftentimes better than schools are doing, with better results and with better attendance, and actually better than the public school system. I know that my daughter-in-law, younger kids, but she was actually sort of pleasantly surprised that she could do as well or even better than the teachers in the schools. Maybe not the teachers, but better than when the kids went to school. And the biggest thing my grandchildren missed was recess. So you also have to keep in mind that many parents have a 2-income family. They have to both work. And how are you going to deal, how would we deal with sort of the babysitter effect, and you mentioned it at the end there, how would we deal with that, where the kids, would that force one parent to stay at home, and what would happen to the reduced income then? And it's unfortunate, but that's what our schools in many cases have become, is a place to stash your kids while you go to work and earn enough money for your family.
I'll honestly admit, to me, that's what school was when my child was much younger than
Right.
they are now.
Right.
School was a convenient daycare for me that I didn't have to pay for.
Right.
That they were taking care of my child. I didn't have to worry about them during the day, and I could get out there and go make my money.
Yeah, and on a snow day, you got upset because you had to stay home because your kid had to stay home. So,
exactly.
so you would
or haul the kid with me to go
Right.
to work, and some parents just don't got that option.
Right. So you wake up in the morning and it's too slippery out for the buses to run, and the school district administrator shuts school down, and you're like, God darn it, now I got to stay home from work and lose, however much money you lose. You mentioned a couple of other things in there that I'm interested in talking about with respect to our school system. So you mentioned administrative staff. So do you know that in Alaska, for instance, we have one administrator, non-teacher, one staffer for every 200 students? This is about 150 students less than the national average. So why do we have so many administrators? So we're talking costs and school costs. If you have one non-teacher for every 200 students, that's a significant chunk of money that you're paying for somebody that's not teaching your children. Why is our school districts become such big, huge businesses, so to speak? I mean, there's 54 school districts. There's one, the Aleutian School District, one of the schools out there. They pay $138,000 per child. So why, you're going to say, well, it's
for
way
6 kids.
for 6 kids. You're going to say it's way out the Aleutians. You know, it's the distance, it's Alaska, it's nasty weather. It could be all that, but as you say, if you had a teacher and an high-speed internet connection out there, you could possibly do that significantly cheaper. So we need to investigate all of these kinds of things. And I know it's a sacred cow, and I'm sure that the teachers union is going to be all over my case for this, but everything needs to be on the table. Everything needs to be on the table. We need to find...
Why can't the teachers get bonuses and raises by... You're describing right now that just by the administrative staff that there's a huge money savings that could be there.
Sure.
We hear from our teachers, especially here in the valley, that they're still in negotiating contracts right now, trying to get more money given to them at the moment, and that would open up here's a big pile that you guys never saw before.
So let me throw this out there. We need to spend money on good quality teachers. I think the teachers need a raise, personally. But the problem is you have this sort of coalition of administrators and teachers, and oftentimes administrators are former teachers, and school has become a business instead of a learning system. We have this business of schools. Drive by the Anchorage School District building on Benson Boulevard there, Northern Lights Boulevard there. Why do we need such a big building? When I was going to high school, the school district was one guy, one secretary in one office in the high school. Why does the school administration need to be this big, huge thing? Why do we need 54 school districts?
Our age is not much different than each other here, and remarkably enough, we had more children going to school then than we do right now currently in the Alaska.
Right. We have increasing budgets, decreasing enrollment, and most frustrating, we have decreasing test scores and the peak scores and the school district scores for our children. Our children are often reading and math capable at less than 40%. So 40 to 60%, depending on grades and what you're talking about, of our students right now are functionally illiterate in the English language and in reading comprehension and in math. Why? We keep throwing money at it. That's obviously not the solution.
52 out of 50 states.
Right.
And because you got to throw Puerto Rico and Guam into it when you go into the school system.
So school administration, much like government, the bigger it gets, the worse it seems to get. So let's go with a small, tight school district number and small, tight administration, and hire some quality teachers. And if we have to do it via Zoom or because of whatever reason, I guess I'm good with that, especially somewhere like the Aleutian Borough that has 6 students in one school and 12 in the other. And I think the school with 12 spends $89,000 per student, and the school with 6, it's $138,000 per student. So,
and you go to
why?
You go to Yugotovic or Barrow, and they're $28,000 per student.
Right,
and it's here in the valley is 13, 14,000 per student.
12 to 18, depending on the school and that sort of thing. It's just, to me, it's frustrating. We seem to be grooming these kids to go to college, and yet the first thing they do when they get to college is UAA has to sell them remedial. So you have to pay
here's
for
your English class. Here's your algebra
that you should have got in high school that you couldn't pass, and now all of a sudden, so now we're paying UAA, and UAA is selling these remedial classes. The whole thing just smacks of a big good old boy business that just needs to tighten up, and it's very frustrating. And like I say, I know it's a sacred cow. I'll probably get a lot of flack for it, but
no, I mean, if they would have had more of a chance for the teachers to have learned how to utilize the system, the students had a chance to learn how to utilize the system, it would have been a much better success than what it had, because we got forced into it. We're going to school, we go on spring break, we come back from spring break to tell you that you're no longer going to school. So 2 weeks later, you're now all going to learn through virtual classrooms, and oh, by the way, we don't have enough tablets to give everybody, but we're going to force this on you anyways, and we're going to tell the teachers that they have to learn how to use this overnight, and these teachers are now going to have to teach students remotely how to use this overnight. And then it was just one big cluster, I'll keep the French word out of the middle of this one, to going to where Matsu has a prime example of a school that succeeded in my
It's
opinion.
a testament to our teachers that they did exactly what you said. They had to learn this Zoom thing. They had to shift to lesson plans online, to taking care of, instead of 20 kids each in a chair that they could point at, now they've got 20 screens, and it's a testament to the quality of the teachers we have. And frankly, I couldn't agree more that we need to pay teachers, good quality teachers, a higher wage. That's almost a given, because they reacted. Look what they did. In fact, I read somewhere that the Anchorage school test scores for seniors actually went up.
They did.
So, hello, have we been doing something wrong? It seems like we have, between the homeschooling for some, that's good for some people, and now our teachers are, they're finally free, I think, to demonstrate their abilities. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, Anchorage, they came out, and I know the article you're talking about. They came out with the graduation rate of 9th grade through 12th grade. And 9th, 10th, and 11th grade actually had worse results than what they had in over the past decade. And a lot of that had to do with students that were just not showing up. They couldn't even get a hold of them once they had been told they didn't have to go to school anymore. I think mainstream media put too much of an emphasis on, if you had a passing grade before, you still got a passing grade now. You don't have to show up to school. You're going to end up having that. A lot of students didn't realize that if their passing grade that they thought they had wasn't a reality, they had a lot of work to do to bring that grade up. So they had a lot of students that just didn't pass. So Anchorage School District extended their school year longer than what it was previously, where the Valley didn't. The Valley, and I think that's one of the reasons why they refused to do a story on it and release the numbers, is I think the Valley had a different result. Is we did a lot better out here than what they were expecting. The shining example that we have is yes, seniors, ASD, best graduation rates they have seen in over a decade, the largest number that they have ever had in the state of Alaska for nearly a decade now. Yet the other ones were a little bit backwards. If they had motivation like the seniors did, they got to now do their classrooms when they wanted to go to class. If they're night owls and like to do things between midnight and 3 a.m., they're doing their homework between midnight and 3 a.m., and they were spending the rest of their day either going to jobs, starting their careers out there in the world. They were doing whatever they needed to do. They had that motivation to get out there and do it. Where the lower grades, if they had the proper training, they could have done a lot better. We got a school out here, Burchell High School, who since day one has been using tablets and has been everything but virtual up until COVID. And I was amazed watching how quickly, while everybody else was struggling to get this stuff, within the first week of the announcement, virtual classrooms are now started. They were right back on schedule, right back on track within that school. They were right back on their lessons. Zoom classes were happening, and students that would show up to their Zoom classes to do no more than spend maybe 5 minutes with the teacher saying, I don't understand this lesson, can you help me out? And then they spend the rest of the hour in that Zoom class with the teachers just sitting there kind of humming a nice little tune behind the scenes while they're silently working on their homework. And if they had any questions, they could just buzz the teacher and say, raise their hand, and the teacher would get back on. What can I help you with? Or see, you could hear the teacher, and I got firsthand experience of this more than once. You could hear the excitement in the teacher's voices.
Yeah.
When a student wanted to ask them a question,
Right.
it's like, we're not just sitting here looking anymore. We can actually do something and participate with your grades.
So 12 years ago, when Skype was brand new, I mean, Zoom is brand new, right? Essentially, right? So 12 years ago when Skype was brand new, I did an MBA in a 2-year class, essentially, or classes, virtually online. I wouldn't even know where to find the campus. But we did everything online through Skype, and of course, still am, but I was a freight pilot going international, and I was doing it on Skype from hotel rooms in China, from hotel rooms in Korea, and so if anybody, and of course that was college level, and a lot of that is more self-directed than high school, but it's still a testament. That was 12 years ago on Skype. Why has it taken us a COVID pandemic to get to the point where we develop this sort of facet of education? I think maybe that's the hidden.
You hit upon it earlier, is the size that our
It's a
school
business.
has gotten to become a business instead
That's
of
right.
an education.
Right. We need an education system that explores all facets, whether that be the 80-20 or the 50-50 or the rolling, the rolling week on, week off sort of thing. But we need to develop all the tools that we have. And, I think this thing demonstrated our teachers are more than ready for it.
Yeah.
More than ready for it.
And I'll admit the children are more than ready for it. I was surprised because my child is one of those that loves school. I have one of those what a lot of parents out there would call a weird child because she loves school. She gets excited before the school year starts. She starts talking about it. She can't wait to meet her teachers. She's just really excited to see what's going on out there and participate in class. Now, this year, she came up to me, her and her best friend. Her best friend goes to the Anchorage School District. Her best friend was not getting the best grades in school. She's never been a very good school-oriented type child, not like mine. She hated going to school, and grades showed it. They went to this online process because of COVID, and my child said, Dad, do you mind if I go to Anchorage to their house and help them learn how to use their tablet and stuff like that and get them onto the Zoom classes? And I said, no, not a problem, go ahead. They ended up, this child who was barely squeaking by, and probably would have had to go to summer school during the year because of the grades, found themselves pulling A's, B's, and C's in classes that they were getting C's, D's, and F in while they were participating in school.
Sure.
My child did what she was doing pre-COVID. She continued right on doing it after COVID started. Well, the irony, what I find is really exciting for me anyways, is that she asked me, do I have to go to school this year? And I looked at her and I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, I love my school and all, you know that, but I really love the freedom I got being able to do my classes online. She goes, I don't mind getting up on a day that I got to have in a Zoom class and meet my teacher online, but you know me, I might be up at midnight and I'm looking for something to do, and I'll pull out my tablet and I started doing my homework, and then I'll go to sleep, and then I got to be at my class at 10 in the morning. She goes, I set my alarm, I wake up, I turn it on, there's my teacher. Whatever questions I couldn't figure out the night before, I spend my 5 minutes, is about all it seems to be, and talk to my teacher, and then I do my work while I'm there and participate the hour that I'm required for my Zoom, and then she's right back onto her own life again. And she's all excited about it. Well, her friend just recently asked the same question to her parents, can I do the exact same thing? And they looked at her and said, if you could get the same grades that you pulled out at the end of this last year, you by all means, where do we sign you up at?
Sure, so maybe this is teaching a little bit of responsibility for your own actions, sort of the cause and effect deal where the child understands that they don't have to go to school and sit in a class that they might be bored. It might be, one of my sons was what they called extended learning program back 30-ish years ago in Kodiak, and the teacher finally, he was a little bit of a troublemaker, and she finally figured out he's bored to tears, and put him in extended learning where he excelled and did very well. So it takes a teacher to figure that out, but maybe we have the same sort of issue here where we're teaching at a lowest common denominator level, and you have some exemplar, some really good kids that are smarter, and they're up here and they're just bored, so they don't do their assignments and they act out and everything else. Now that they're responsible for it, now they can move at their own pace. Maybe it's a good thing. It will be, I think, of all the things to come out of this, the pandemic and the shutdown, I think that and the homeschooling, the things that some of our parents learned about homeschooling and their abilities will be a good thing to come out of this.
It's going to be an interesting new year.
Right.
Let's move on here. We've got so we covered the K through 12 early education. We've explored several different options to be able to make it work. Parents that may want to still do it, just so any of the viewers out there that are curious right now, you can enroll into virtual classrooms for the new school year. You don't have to limit yourself to going just to school. You can go ahead and enroll yourself right now, enroll your students. They're ready and rocking to go ahead and put you into that, no questions asked. And you can go with something that's local, or you could go with the governor's plan where he had invested some money into a virtual classroom that's based out of Florida there,
right,
and their platform that they have, which is also something that my child is exploring. She goes, I really do love my teachers here, but if it means I could get a better education than what they could provide me here locally, maybe I should look at this one too. And it's one of those that it's empowering to let your child have a choice in their future.
Sure. Just think of what it does for, say, the village schools, where you might not have the population base to keep a school open. So you have 4 or 6 kids. They might all be lumped into the same classroom with one teacher teaching at different levels. That was the Mount Edgecombe thing with villages sent their children to Mount Edgecombe because it was a better education. Well, maybe we have a better way of doing that right now with the Zoom classes, where somebody in the Aleutian district or somewhere in a village somewhere, maybe even not in a village, maybe somewhere in the unorganized borough off the grid somewhere, or living with their folks, and now suddenly they have access to different, better quality education, whether it be the Florida plan or calling into Anchorage to some of the classes we have here. To me, I think it's a win. It obviously it will need some controls and callers and all that sort of thing, but man, it's something that maybe we should have been looking at long ago, instead of multi-million-dollar schools in villages with 54 person population.
Yep. which kind of this the entire conversation that we just had about K through 12 and early learning segues right into the University of Alaska. They just recently came out within the past week or so the next steps that they are doing for their openings. A lot of their classes are moving to virtual online classrooms, and the only ones that are not moving virtual are the ones that you need that hands-on with equipment. You're going to be a veterinarian. You can learn the book stuff, but you can't get that hands-on stuff virtually.
Yeah, it's
you
hard
have
to
be there physically
hard to dissect a frog over the.
It is. And so there's a lot of different courses out there, and I think our university it would be a prime example of something that what they're branching themselves into would be how our K through 12 and early learning needs to also be thinking about how to approach their next level of education here in Alaska. Is you will have classes in K through 12 that you need that physical, hands-on type of an environment to really help a person blossom and grow. But not all the classes, 80% of the classes are not hands-on classes. They are sit down in front of a book, read all day long, you're writing letters and all that other stuff. Everything's already done on computers for all of that anyways, so it's not one step further than what they're already doing. It just took it home instead of being in the classroom. The University of Alaska is kind of a big monkey on our back too. We were talking about the K through 12 and their $1.3 billion budget that they have. The University of Alaska is $900 million is what they started out in 2018. Governor Walker, with the president of the university, they negotiated a contract. They reduced it by 75 million more. We've now spent 50 million of that has been reduced over the last 2 years. And they got one more year to go of another 25 more million to reduce off of that budget to meet the contractual obligations that they have agreed to. So we went from 900 million to 825 million dollars for our University of Alaska spending budget. This is approximate numbers. The numbers that I take from started out was on a presentation that the governor was doing going around the state. 900 million is the number he had at that point. This was 2 years ago. The 800 million, 25 million, that's approximately where they're going to end up once they're done with the contract. We're going to be moving into the future of where we're going to be this next school year for both of them. Thanks to COVID, a lot of the money that would normally have been generated this year is completely gone out the window. We're looking at a lot smaller revenue coming in the door than what they have had in previous years. Instead of having that 4.3 billion to roughly $5 billion that they've had to spend every year through the tax revenue that was collected from all the different entities out there for the budget, they're looking at closer to 4 billion, maybe $4 billion to come in. They're going to have to come up with that money somewhere if they want to continue to keep spending at the levels that they are at right now. I think this would be a prime opportunity for you as a potential legislator when you go to Juneau to take what we've been discussing here and approaching them on a more open level and saying, hey, here's our viable options. This is what we can and can't do. And I know that, and hopefully the audience out there, I know they're going to agree with me on this, that this is the type of legislators we're looking to elect into office this year, is people that are willing to go there and not continue to be stuck inside of that box, and to start looking beyond that box for the solutions that are not being tried just because people are too scared.
So one of the plans that I have heard put forth by a current sitting legislator is an accountability plan. So, okay, UAA, or any department, frankly, you want $825 million or however much you want from the state. It's not that much, but however much you want from the state, we're willing to give that to you, but show us what you did with it last year. How about some accountability? What did you do with the millions of dollars we gave you last year? What's your graduation rate? 8 of the top 10 state employees are employed by UAA, paid top 10 paid employees. If you look at salaries and you look at 8 of the top 10, they're all UAA professors. So,
yeah.
So really, I mean, that's a little bit frustrating, and I'll probably earn the ire of the professors union as well. But my point is, and maybe they deserve it, but UAA, I mean, we're going way far afield from your question, but UAA is a land grant university. So they have a certain endowment with the land that they've been given that they should be using that they have never used, not once. I think there's some land in the Tongass, and there's land all over that they can be using. Other entities, native corporations, have used the land that they've been given very, very well to put leases on.
One of my favorite examples would be Muldoon in the
Takotnu Center. Yep.
They still the corporation there still owns the land. They're leasing it out to all of those businesses, and they're making money hand over fist.
And I understand that you can actually, as a university, you can actually go back to the federal government, and keep in mind that the federal government, I think, owns 60% of the land in Alaska.
Yes.
So you can go back to the federal government and say, hey, you know what? Haven't quite been able to make this work because of X, Y, Z, whatever reason, and get more land for your land grant university. Why haven't we done that? Why are we so totally dependent? Oh, that's right. It's because we got oil coming in, and we don't need to worry about using our brain power or our salesmanship or whatever it takes to use the land. You know, and the other frustrating thing, and I told you about this earlier, is we graduate 10% of the students that enroll in UAA. It's a 10% graduation rate. So most universities.
And it slightly gets better as you get from the 2-year to the 4-year
Right.
to the 6-year degrees.
Right. So most universities like Yale and Harvard and Princeton and you know, any George Washington, any of those major universities, they have a huge alumni association, and the alumni contribute money back to the school for whatever, for football fields or for hockey teams or for uniforms or whatever. Well, how do you develop a great, huge alumni association with a 10% graduation rate? It's just, we're not thinking about this right. All we're thinking about right now is we got plenty of oil coming in, the state's going to give us lots of money, and oh, by the way, this isn't really an education system again, it's a business.
It's a business.
And we need to get away from that. We're not selling classes, we're educating kids. And we need to find a way to do it leaner and meaner because, frankly, kids are getting frustrated with college loans, the trillions of dollars of unpaid college loans. It's a huge financial bubble that's going to hurt us in the end. So kids are getting away from going to college, and the UAA and our other, I think, 13 campuses and 3 university systems, they need to figure out a way to get lean and mean because eventually they're going to suffer because kids are figuring it out. They're not going to go to college. They're going to go to a Voc Tech, like Mike Rowe says. You know, they're going to go learn a trade, something that actually pays them money from the day they step out of the door instead of having to look for a job with a political science degree or a liberal arts degree that is meaningless. You know, so lots to unpack, lots to talk about there. I could go on with that for hours, frankly, but the UAA, it's a problem. They need to figure it out. I think Mike Dunleavy initially on it, he said UAA is populated by a bunch of smart people and they will figure it out. Well, all they could figure out to do was to go online and on the mainstream media and whine about it was 44%, that they took a 44% hit, and everybody believed that for about a week.
Yeah.
And then it became...
They still believe it, even
Yeah,
though it's one
it's
big
not-
false news, fake news
Right.
lie.
I mean, I read something, our students at UAA are costing $98,000 a year. Wow, really? Why? So, accountability.
They're not paying that much, but that's
Right.
they include what the state.
Right. So accountability, I think we need some accountability. Just like our K through 12, we need some accountability. So the state formula for the amount of money spent or given to every school per child, I forget the alphabet soup initials for it, but essentially we give every school a certain amount of money from the state for head. It's a minimum basic allowance or something like that. It has to do with allowance. I can't remember it right now. But anyways, that does not include any kind of metrics for learning. Nothing. It has to do with the tax base of the local community, has to do with the number of children you have in your school that have special needs, all sorts of things, but no metrics.
Allocated for every child that's a special needs, you could receive funding as if it was 8 children.
13, I think, actually.
Okay.
Might be 12, but it's right. It's up there. So my point is why is there no metrics in there that include how well the school is teaching our children, right? I mean, federal funding, the federal funding that some of our schools get, if your school is doing worse, if it's doing bad, you get more federal funding. So where's your incentive to actually teach our children?
To do better.
Yeah, it's so.
The worse you are, the more you make, the better you do, the less you get.
And college is the same way. So the university president, who's no longer there, he said, well, we got 44% cut. Well, you got 44% cut of what the state gives you, but it's not 44% of your budget. And the frustrating thing to me is then he went on and said, we're going to have to cut all these programs and all these teachers. Well, why is that the first thing how about let's not buy a new snowplow this year? Or
how about close down this one satellite campus that, look here, this one satellite costs $25 million a year.
So the answer should not always
The
be.
teachers can be moved. It was the campus itself, the brick and mortar part that was costing the fortune.
The answer should not always be, oil's running out, we're all getting upset, we're all feeling the squeeze, but the answer should not always be, let's cut programs. Let's find the most emotional thing that everybody in the community is going to be the most upset about and tell them we're going to cut that, and maybe they'll call the governor and he'll back off on his plan to cut our budget, which is exactly what happened.
And I'll be honest here, that there's not a thing that either you or I have discussed that for cutting of any of these budgets that would be doing the talking points that you just described. None of our budget says we're going to cut a single teacher from
Right.
their job.
Right.
It's not their jobs that are on the line here. Their jobs are the most important. They're the ones we want to keep. It's what's that's taking away from their jobs that we want to have change.
Right. And, just like the state, the university wants a predictable, a sustainable, and an affordable budget. All of our state departments need to have, whether it be the university or the Department of Transportation, they all need to operate from that perspective. It needs to be sustainable, it needs to be affordable, and needs to be predictable. And the only possible way to do that, I would add the fourth thing in there, they need to be accountable to the money that they're spending, to the legislature that is giving them that money, and the governor that is signing off on the budget. And that's my rant, and I'm sticking to it.
Changing of subjects here. We've got one more big monkey in the room that's always in the state legislature every single year, and that's health and social services. 2018 estimated budget was right around $2.47 billion. Roughly $2.5 billion is what we as a state had spent on it, and this is in 2018. Just last year, that just ended here recently, we spent $3.6 billion on health and social services. That is a $1.1 billion jump in just 2 short years. How are we going to deal with this in the future? The reason why I bring that question up right now is we've got the Medicaid expansion.
Obama.
That Walker saddled on us with his unilateral signature, their executive order type deal.
That's Obamacare Light, is the Medicare expansion. That's the part of it that has not gone away yet, right?
And yes, and they had taken most of the people that enrolled into it and moved them straight over into our actual Medicare system because of income requirements that increased. So you before it was like you could make $28,000 or less, and then you would be eligible for Medicaid. Because of the expansion they had done, they increased it. Now you can make $40,000 a year and or less, and now qualify for it. So you can make $12,000 more than you could. So a lot of those people that had gone into Obamacare Light actually never even got there. They were automatically transferred over to what we pay 50-50 already on. 50% state, 50% federally covered. Obamacare Light, which they proudly announced that took our numbers from around 150,000 Alaskans that were on Medicaid prior to this to 225,000 Alaskans and growing daily. It's not a number that shrunk thanks to COVID. That number is actually getting a lot larger right now. This is a bill that is going to continue to keep increasing. They had budgeted out $3.1 or $2 billion last year. This year's budget, $3.2 billion for health and social services. They had to add in almost $600 million supplemental budget to last year's budget, which is where you got that $3 billion they started out with, the 3.6 that they spent at the end of the year. I'm still waiting for the final numbers to come out right now. I have predictions that have already been published that I'm thinking is going to get closer to $4 billion before they're through with the actual numbers of what health and social services cost this past year. And that's pre-COVID. This is not none of the COVID stuff being added into it. This is just what we were spending normally. Is there any, can you personally see any sort of solutions to reducing this monster? I mean, that's over 1/3 of our state's budget is going to just this one department. I mean, K through 12 and the university combined is still $1.5 billion less than what our health and social services is costing us in this state.
So once again, the oil glut or the oil is running out. We're losing money. We are not in a financial situation where we can afford to just spend without question. So we need to question everything. It needs to be accountable. For instance, did you know that all of the native health care now is no longer paid for by the Indian Health Service? It's paid for by the state, Medicaid, and then they're supposed to be reimbursed by the Indian Health Service, but they have not been. So is it our fault that we haven't been billing the federal government? And also veterans now are going to the native hospitals, such as here in the Valley, instead of going all the way into Anchorage. How is that billed? So we need some transparency and some accountability. Problem is, in a 90-day session, how does a legislator, how does a junior, possibly junior representative find that accountability? We need an inspector general. So I'm segueing or pivoting a little bit, but the inspector general is somebody that's going to watch this. For instance, and this is another bunny trail, but we attended.
So you're talking like an audit?
An audit would be perfect. So I'm a member of a group that does some looking, a think tank, if you will, called the Alaskan Roundtable, that does some looking at this kind of thing. And I saw a report the other day that talked about investigating Medicaid and Medicare fraud, and for every dollar that the state spends investigating that, they get $3.65 back into their coffers or is not used. So typical, this is a classic case of accountability. We had lots of money, nobody seemed to care. We were spending it like drunken sailors, or even worse, because a drunken sailor quits spending when he runs out of money. But we didn't care. Well, now we care. So now we have to make people accountable. I was going to tell you, the state has had a credit card for their commissioners and some managers and stuff for 30-ish years. It's never once been audited. Never once. So how does that happen? How do we, I'm not saying that there's any malfeasance or anything else, but it needs to be audited. We need to know where the money's going. And the legislature, before they spend money or send money to a department, they need to see some accountability. And if there's fraud, waste, and abuse, that's why we have an inspector general. I'm a huge proponent of that. We had one in the military when I was growing up, and it just makes sense. They have to be accountable to somebody. They have to be accountable for the money that they are essentially being given, whether it be a department manager or UA president or the head of one of the commissions. You know, they have to be accountable, and we have to know where it's going. Health and Human Services is a big one. I get that. We told Walker that 7 years ago, that going down this Obamacare light thing was going to cost the state more money than the prices were going to go up. Even the hospitals. The hospitals we need to understand how much they're spending. You know, why can't I if I need a hip replacement, why can't I go to Providence or Humana or somebody else and say, how much is a hip replacement going to cost me? And, you know, the answer is always, well, do you have insurance or not? Well, wait a minute. What if I don't have insurance? Oh, well, then it's $40,000. Well, what if I do have insurance? Well, then it's $140,000. That's the kind of borderline fraud, but we allow it, so it's not really, but it's abuse. It's abuse of the public money.
I just had a recent experience myself. I try very hard to avoid hospitals. I've never liked them one bit. And I had to go do my annual physical checkup so that I could continue to receive the medications that I'm on for the heart attacks I've received in the past. And because of that, and because we're supposed to be having accountability, transparency happening now, my first question to them is how much is this appointment going to cost me? And they said, well, here's what the doctor's appointment visit is, but we can't tell you what your labs are going to cost you. We can't tell you what it's going to cost you for the revisit to come back for this thing, if that's even included in that. So you can't even give me a ballpark picture of what my overall bill might look like. And, oh no, sir, sorry, we can't provide that to you. And I'm going, so at this point, I could be looking at $200. I could be looking at a $500 bill. I could be looking at a $1,000 bill just for my checkup. And say, well, yes, sir, that's correct. That's what it could be. We're just not sure how that's going to work out for you on that.
Right. I had a lady call me the other day, wanted to talk about that very specific thing. She said, my husband has recently had some sort of an injury, and he needs to be on an oxygen machine, an oxygen generator machine. She said, I was worried because I wasn't sure it was going to be covered, so I looked it up on Amazon. $500 brand new on Amazon. She said, when I went to the doctor, they gave me a prescription. I went to Geneva Woods, and they said, that's okay, the state's paying for it. And she said, because I am who I am, she did exactly what you did. How much is the state paying for it? Well, they're paying $95 a month. Really, so my husband needs to be on this for X amount of years at $95 a month. And she said she figured up the total bill, and they were $14,922 or some ungodly number for a $500 oxygen generator. And she said, when I finally got it, I looked and it said remanufactured and overhauled. So it was a used one for a $500 machine. That, to me, that kind of thing needs to be solved. And I think that Senator Hughes has a bill that she's working on right now with price controls, or at least price tags.
She's been trying to get that through now for the last 4 years that I've been following politics. That has been one of her big push points.
So if we are stuck with Medicaid, Obamacare Light, and if the state, if we can't, and obviously that genie is bottle, we need to get some accountability and some transparency, and we need to stop paying these exorbitant costs or prices for something that is not that expensive. And we need to find creative ways to do it. If that involves maybe a health savings account where we give you a certain percentage if you find good deals on
that they are actually
generic.
doing. I know of several people that have done
Right.
it. They went and price shopped and called up the hospital in Mexico and said, hey, what would it cost for my procedure to
Right.
come there and do it, or down in just to Seattle? What would it cost me to do my procedure there
Right.
here in Seattle, and find out, hey, it's a $20,000 savings to have it done here versus doing it in Alaska. State of Alaska signed the check.
Free market.
Flew them right on down there, no cost to them. Put
Right.
them up in the hotel room, had them do what they needed to do, and flew them back.
Right. So unfortunately, a lot of consumers are not like that, because just like the legislature, they're spending other people's money. They're spending the state's money. They don't care. So just like we need to do with the legislature, we need to somehow find a way to make them care, or to incentivize them so they will care, so that they can maybe get a little of incentive to buy generic drugs, or to buy this thing off of Amazon instead of renting it for $95 a month or whatever. But we certainly need to find creative solutions to our financial difficulties, and it would seem to me with $3.6 billion, there ought to be a lot of creative solutions found in there somewhere.
Most definitely. And we're going to go into the more the last few of the questions that I have here. They have a SB 115. Is a bill that has been passed by the Senate. It is currently sitting in the House. When they went back to talk about the CARES Act and pass the CARES Act bill that they're quibbling about right now, they had put SB 115 back onto the docket. I had received the text message from Juneau saying that this had been placed on there. I've tracked certain bills I track on a regular basis. So I received notification that this particular bill was going to be heard on the first month we're back there. And I'm going, oh, wow, okay. And so I put out my notice to everybody out there that follows me that this bill is going to be heard. Towards the late evening of that day, I kept waiting for it to get presented on the House floor, because it's already passed through the Senate and it's in the House's hands. And it didn't happen. Later on that evening, I get another text message. It got moved to the next day. And then I got another text message. It got moved to the next day. And then I got one final message that said that it has been completely dropped this session that they ended. And it has been now forwarded to the next session when it begins, whether they have a special session this year or when they go back to Juneau in the following year when they start the brand new 32nd legislative section of the year. So they get back to Juneau, and then what this bill is, SB 115, is our motor fuel tax, where they're going to double our fuel tax that we currently pay into our government. It's roughly about 16 cents more a gallon than what we're paying right now. It doesn't sound like a lot when you just say it like that. But those that have gone through the Anchorage's 10 cents gas increase, people like us who come from the valley, I'm sure you are just like I am now. I used to wait to go buy my gas when I went to Anchorage, and I wouldn't buy it out here. Since they put the 10-cent gas tax on Anchorage, I no longer buy my gas in Anchorage because it's cheaper out here in the valley. I'm there on an almost daily basis, so that's a lot of money that tax revenue that they're no longer seeing from me. But if they do this on a statewide level, you're going to be going from 16 cents a gallon that you pay currently to 32 cents a gallon. So that now you're going to watch your gas prices increase statewide. This is a bill that you are, if they don't have a special session this year on it, this would be a bill that you're going to have to be dealing with when you get back to Juneau. I know that we're in a fiscal crisis right now, but do you think new taxes is the way to go at the moment? It seems like that's the only way they want to fix our fiscal crisis. Head tax for education. Here's a motor fuel tax to increase on there. And they have carved out special privileges on that motor fuel tax. If you're in a rural village and you buy gas to put into your four-wheeler, that is tax exempt. The ferry systems are tax exempt from this increase. This is how they have built it in. But and airplanes, of course, are tax exempt. But if you are anything to do with a motorized vehicle, you are no longer tax exempt. You are now going to pay for it, that extra tax.
So is this over and above the $75 tire tax? I'm sorry, I'm kidding. But so I started this off by saying I am a fiscally conservative Republican. And when I say that, I mean I will fight any tax. I understand that there will be taxes necessary, maybe at some point, somehow. I mean, that's how we're paying for the Glen Highway, right, out of the 16 cents a gallon, supposedly, that we get, right? But it's frustrating to me to see the special interests that get involved in a tax like this. Why is it that every time the economy starts to shrink, everybody's sort of having a hard time? There's a recession threatening on the horizon, or COVID comes up, all of a sudden the state, who is losing money as well, whether it be the DOT or the legislature or the governor or whoever, now they say, oh, we got to tax them more. Well, when you remove money from the public, you remove a dollar that, if you spend $1, the multiplier is like 7. If the state spends $1, the multiplier is like 1.2. So why are we removing wealth from the wealth generator that can actually provide a stimulus? Why are we going to remove money from you that you're not going to spend to help stimulate the economy and bring the economy up? So free market economy, taxes, they're an anathema. We should have no taxes, but unfortunately we're going to have to. So I agree that taxes, if they ever come to fruition, need to be as close as possible to what they're being taxed. I don't know that we can earmark it like that. So in other words, if we're going to add a motor fuel tax, Can we say, well, this motor fuel tax is for the highways, for the Glen Highway? We're going to take all this money, this extra 16 cents, and we're going to put it into a fund, and we're only going to spend it on highways. I don't think you can do that. I don't think, it all's supposed to come out of the general fund, right? So it all has to go into the general fund, and then we reverse sweep it, or however we do it, we get it back into there's no possible way to say this 16, it's like the alcohol tax in Anchorage, right? Well, that's going to go for the homeless. How do you possibly do that? How can you possibly say that with a straight face? So I'm not so sure that 16 cents a gallon is needed, unless you look at my road, and then I need more than that, but my road is horrible. Thank you, Matsu. So no, the answer to that question is I am taxes. I will be a no vote on every tax unless I am thoroughly convinced, and not only by other legislators but by my constituents, that it's necessary.
So I'm going to take your stance on this just to make it really put into a nutshell there. No new taxes until there's fiscal accountability for the money that's already being spent out there.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Moving on to the really hard question now. And this is difficult for most people. I know when you fill out your paperwork to become a prospective legislator in the beginning of the vetting process, you have to list a criminal history. In Alaska, you're required as the seat that you're running for, you have to list any felony that's been in the last 10 years. You have to list any misdemeanor that has been in the last 5 years. We had a person here recently that was last year. He was running for a seat in one of the appointed positions that the governor gets to have, and he was going through the legislative process of being confirmed or rejected. And they call him the ghost hunter. The media made a big, huge issue out of it because he ran a program or a business that helped people find ghosts. I always get a chuckle out of that.
I remember this story, yeah.
And but that's not what cost him the confirmation. It was his criminal record. And I personally, I don't know what that record is. I've never looked it up myself, but I do know that it was approximately 37 years ago at the time this was going on last year. 37 years ago that this criminal record actually happened. In that time, in those 37 years, whistle clean, nothing there, never committed another crime, has an exemplary record. It's one of those glorified cases that we all want to hear about, recidivism, and it didn't occur. He actually was one of those that improved himself, got better in the world, and ran the straight and narrow just like everybody dreams to do. I mean, who hasn't had a speeding ticket in their life? Some things like that. I mean, they're very far and few in between individuals that don't have at least a misdemeanor on their record, or a ticket like that, or something like that that might have gotten them in trouble that they're just not aware of. Is there, in John Francis's case, he wasn't even supposed to have listed it because that's not what the requirement was, but we're talking about modern age, digital technology, local media, and the competition campaigns out there looking for anything to smear a candidate with, to derail them because they're afraid of the momentum that they're getting. Is there anything that we should be aware of criminal-wise, or, and I'm gonna expand this just one step further, the Me Too era. We watched legislators over the last couple of years, they've been elected legislators, have Me Too moments in their lives that was known about prior to them being elected, or at least for one of them, and I'm only going to go back just a few years. We could go really deep dive, but just the last couple of years. We've had Carl Johnson, who was another appointee to the governor, that was completely rejected for a Me Too moment, that we're still waiting for that magical unicorn to appear to let us, the public, know exactly what Me Too moment in his life he was accused of. He was another Brett Kavanaugh style case where he never did, and nowhere even close to the vetting that Kavanaugh got. He never got to meet his accuser. He never got to even know the name of the accuser that was claiming this. But if we're listening to Ivy Spinanza, who was the one who had taken the podium against him, she had this magical unicorn that flew in from Venus and whispered in her ear that this guy has a Me Too moment in his life, and we're going to derail any chances he has of being confirmed here because of that. I blame it on the binding caucus type legislation that we have in Juneau, that his confirmation never happened because so many of the legislators caved in fear of what was going to happen if they stood up for this person, demanding to have the accusers brought forward, present the evidence. Another good example of a false Me Too would be David Wilson. He in the legislative halls in Juneau when he was supposedly eavesdropping at an ear by a door to a meeting that was going on behind closed doors. And he jokingly said, and he pulled out his phone and kind of halfway showed it sliding towards underneath the door. If I really wanted to know what was going on with it in there, I'd just put my phone underneath the door and just record the conversation. I have no idea that was said. Well, the accusation came out that he actually took his phone and he was trying to upskirt this aide. The proof was there that he hadn't done it. The videotape that are there in the Juneau halls showed that there was no way that was what the scenario they were accusing him of ever happened. But we had leadership in charge. We had Scott Kawasaki, we had Bruce Edgman, we had Chris Tuck, we had Ivy Spinanza, who was also a part of that. We have Gabrielle Ledukes, all rallying against David Wilson, demanding he resign right now, no ifs, ands, or buts, because you've been accused of a Me Too. And he did absolutely nothing. It took David Wilson going to the press and telling the press what the story was to finally get them to re-review this case to where they came back out, was still without ever showing anybody the tape, and said David Wilson was right. This was a false allegation. We're going to drop all charges. I wish I could say that was the end of the story, but David Wilson ended up being brought up on ethic charges because he took the case to the press so that he could prove that he was innocent instead of having to resign like they were trying to force him to do. This is not limited to just false allegations. Magical unicorns coming from out of the sky that we still have yet to see or declared that they're real. We have Dean Westlakes, who outright known harassment, was elected knowing he had harassment charges placed against him. He had filed complaints with the House Judiciary Committee there of harassment. Bryce Edgman, Chris Tuck, and the rest of those in charge of the ethic committees kept this information buried. They used it technically, whether they want to admit it or not, and just as an assumption of my own here, as blackmail to get him to vote the way they wanted him to on everything that was coming out in front. Along with Dean Westlakes, we got Zach Fields. His stayed buried for a couple months before something happened there, and that was because the actual victim took it to the press. He beat her up. Very rough sex is the way he called it back then. It was a lot more than just that. But he deserved to outright be gone. But it took bringing it forward. Why in this world would that have happened, and why wasn't this automatically challenged the moment they found out about it, other than the fact that this was a Democrat and they wanted to keep it hidden and undisclosed, where David Wilson, Carl Johnson, they both got rejected on Me Too moments, and they were instantly told to resign or you're not going to be confirmed on just rumors. Not even real people coming forward with actual proof or videotapes showing that this didn't happen. These people had proof that it happened. We've got one more prime example of the Me Too. We got Governor Brian Mallett, who was also a part of what I would say is the Me Too movement out there. He mysteriously overnight turns in his resignation during the last year of their office there, and no explanation why he was resigning or anything else. There was an article that came out this year that was a letter that was sent from his wife to him, and an inner communication through the government's process, and that's the reason why it's out there now. That really did hint upon that the reason why he had resigned was because of the Me Too moment. They still didn't disclose any details, but what was written in that letter made it quite clear why his resignation was happened so quickly and why he was gone. So to wrap up the question here and put it all into perspective, because I'd love to showboat the past of why this is so important. Do you have a criminal record that anything that it may be from you were a teenager and was stupid and took a magazine from off the rack and stuck it in your back shirt and got busted for it, or a Me Too that is all of a sudden going to creep up out of the woodwork out there that's going to, you get elected and you no longer have a job?
That was a very long way to get to that question.
It is.
So
I'm here to expose the dirt that media doesn't
Sure.
do, so.
I get it. So I think in 1983 I had a ticket in Kodiak for not having lights on my trailer. I have since not had a ticket for having lights on my trailer, so I guess I'm a success story. I don't have, I have not, no recidivism there. I have not gone back to that. So I have no criminal record. I have a wife who worked for APD, and she is has very well trained me. Basically, she said when we were living in Anchorage that if I ever got a ticket, that she would have to face all of her coworkers, and because my name would be on the ticket, and she was unwilling to do that, so I better fly straight. I'm just like any other kid born in the, that went through the '60s. I've done stupid stuff. I've never been I've never been convicted of anything. I've certainly had a number of policemen talk to me when I was a football player in Minnesota and say, but that was back when they could do that, and then they would call my dad, and then my dad would beat me, and I learned not to do that kind of thing. So, but I don't have anything in my background as far as the Me Too movement. A lot of that is frustrating to watch that happen on so many levels. I have great respect. And, at 62 years old, I occasionally will call somebody honey that maybe I shouldn't, but it's never a sexual thing. I mean, I've had ladies call me honey, so it's just it's a sort of a term of endearment, and maybe I need to get by that, but
I just recently had a past legislator give me a parting remark about my toucan. So it I guess it's really hard to, as you're trying to describe here, it's not that when did innocent things get taken so far out of whack?
Well, I think but I think the problem is it might be innocent on my part and it might be innocent on your part, but there are other people where it hasn't been innocent, and they have created a sexual tension or a Me Too moment essentially that was inappropriate, and I have never done that. I've had many women work for me in the Coast Guard, as well as work for me now. I fly 747s, and I often have female crew with me, female co-pilots, or maybe another captain, and I like to think that I treat them like a co-pilot, not like a female or a female co-pilot. I mean, they're there to do a job. I'm there to do a job. We have to do the job together. I don't really care what their physique is, or their it's just
Yeah,
I mean,
no, let's just leave it right there.
Yeah,
it's You have none then, so I take it.
Yeah, so the answer is I have none. You know, I'm just like every other guy or many other guys in the country. I think I've been divorced, and you know, I have adult children, and I have some stepchildren, and I have grandchildren, and you know, I like to think that I'm friends with all of them, and even my ex-wives, and I have a wife that keeps me on the straight and narrow. So I don't know what else to say about
off
that.
into the distance
Yeah,
out there.
where is she?
And I'm gonna, let's see, let me just take a quick look here. The two simple ones that any real true conservative can answer with either a yes or no: abortions.
Abortions. You want a one-word answer? No. Sorry, I think life begins at a conception. I have a little share on that one. So I've had some discussions with some folks that on two fronts: abortions and life at conception, as well as creationism or intelligent design versus Darwin's theory or evolution, right? So I have a question out there for all those that believe in evolution and believe in Darwin's theory. They all believe that life began from a single cell amoeba crawling out of the primordial ooze that suddenly developed, or not suddenly, but over billions of years, whatever, millions of years, developed into you and I from a single cell. So why then again is the baby in a woman's womb not life until we have a heartbeat? I mean, we look for life on Mars and we say, oh, yeah, there's life there because there's a drop of water. Well, why? Well, because there might be an amoeba in that water, so that's life. Why is it life up there, but it's not life? And so I'm a little confused at that, but I believe in life at conception. I'm sorry, that's just the way I was raised, and I'm too old to change right now.
Gun rights.
So I have seen some signs from my from other, well, my opponent, frankly, that says NRA endorsed. I'm an NRA life member. I grew up in the military. I'm familiar with guns. I firmly believe in the Second Amendment. I don't believe guns are there for hunting. I believe guns are there for exactly what Thomas Jefferson said. The tree of liberty needs to be refreshed now and again with the blood of patriots and tyrants, and our government needs to understand, and I think they do, as well as every other government on the planet, there's a reason Americans have guns. That's what our Second Amendment's about. It's there to protect the first 5 clauses, or the 5 clauses in the First Amendment.
Like I said, there was a simple answer. The simplest questions of them all of the day. We kind of touched upon it a little bit, but I'm just going to take it just one little step further and add in the roadless rule. We have the roadless rule here in Alaska that says we're not allowed to build our own roads. We can't expand into the Tongass Forest because we can't build a road to be able to do the logging in the Tongass Forest. We've got a place in that we can't build a life-saving road that we have been trying to get now for decades, so that we don't have to worry about medevac trying to get these folks out when a storm is brewing or happening there, that would toss that little medevac plane straight into the drink, and then we need 2 rescue crews, one for the person that needed the medevac to begin with, and the get the medevac out of whatever drink of water they just got blown into because of the storm. This kind of goes into our resources. It ties in with our
Sure.
resources here in Alaska. We got our mining, our oil, our fishing, and our forest are the big 5. And I say the big 5 because I'm going to throw in one more resource there, our PFD, the untalked about resource. Because if it wasn't for the mining, the forests, the oil, and the fishing that is going on there, we would not have a PFD, because all 4 of these things contribute a portion of their revenue every year. A portion of their revenue goes into that earnings reserve account. What if you are elected, these are the subjects you're going to have to face in the future? Not so much the roadless rule, other than a unified voice on there forcing the federal government to finally do something.
Sure, that's what it all boils down to, essentially.
And then our resources for mining, oil, fishing, and timber, as long as that roadless rule is in place, most of that is benign because you can't get to the resources of where they're at in the first place.
Sure, so the federal government put us in this bind, essentially. They didn't give us the amount of land that we were supposed to get. They have withheld some of it, and yet we are supposed to develop our resources. Our Constitution says we're supposed to develop our resources. So how do we do that without a road, say, to Ambler, right? It just, so they say...
Kennecott back in its day.
Or Kennecott, or the King Cove thing, which is a little bit different. So this is a problem created by the federal government, I think. 60% of our land is owned by the federal government in the state of Alaska. Less than 1% is privately owned. 44 million acres, I think that's 28%, is owned by the native corporations that they got from the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act when they sort of traded their sovereignty for land for them to develop things like the Takatnu Center and that sort of thing, which I arguably was a great deal, but the federal government held on to all the rest of this land. Why? And then we have cases like the Yukon case with the guy that wanted to go moose hunting with his hovercraft, and we have this federal overreach. The state, just like taxation, if we, like gas tax needs to be applied as closest to, or any tax needs to be applied as closest to where it's taxed as possible, I think that the government needs, the state government needs to be able to manage its own state. So 10th Amendment stuff, right? That's what we're talking about. And it's frustrating the federal government be able to step in when they want and say, oh, sorry, you can't do this here because you can't build a road because you can't, because we said you can't. Well, wait a minute, we want to develop our resources. Just think of the rare earth elements down in Sitka, or even the Pebble Mine area, or maybe there's a big deposit up there get into the Ambler mining district. We need to be able to develop those. We need to, and we can build roads. We've done it safely. We can manage our own resources if the federal government will just get out of our way. Give us the land that belongs to us, that you said you would in 1959 when we became a state, and let us do our thing. We'll be much better off for it. We won't have the deep state bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. making decisions for scene based on a picture that is not Anwar, it's somewhere in the Andes. I mean, this is craziness.
I still get the chuckle out of watching it. It's going to affect our moose population and our reindeer population out there. And you see them standing on top of the pipeline.
Yeah.
I always get a chuckle out of those pictures as they walked all the way up there, just standing there. Down to the final question here.
I'm going to hold you to that.
It's a two-parter.
Uh-oh.
So, but it is the final question. Why should we vote for you over anybody else that is currently running? And if you are elected, what bills do you think you'd want to pass?
So you should vote for me because I am a fiscally conservative Republican. I'm not going to add $350 million back into the budget after my fellow Republicans have already removed it. Sorry, said I wasn't going to go negative, but that's a fact that's easily verifiable. I'm going to communicate in any venue that you choose to communicate, from Twitter to email. I will answer emails, I will answer phones, I will answer texts, I will talk to you. I love watching Shelley Hughes and Mike Shower on there. Mike Shower, he needs to get an Emmy or an Oscar for some of those, And
for Mike Shower, I do want to point. I'm sorry, Mike, if you're watching this. I would like to be able to have a slow down button. He talks so fast. I mean, he unpacks a lot. He's very clear about it, and you can't. But he does it so quickly. He's getting good at slowing down. But
he's a fighter pilot. He thinks at 500 knots. That's just the way. That's what happens. So, anyways, I want to be that type of legislator. Like Sarah Vance is doing it now. I've seen Sarah Rasmussen on some of these. So the legislators, we need a shift. We need a new paradigm in Juneau. We need a legislator that can talk to his people, that it can explain to them what's going on, that can help them to understand, like you understand what's going on. I know you watch Shelley Hughes all the time and Mike Shower, and that's how we know half of what we know. And it's government by the people, for the people, by the people. I'm just down there to vote the way you want me to vote. And you can't tell me how to vote if you don't know what I know. So I want to be that type of person. So that's why, that's what I'm going to do different. And as far as the second part of the question, which you said, I believe that some of the first bills that I'm going to desperately try to get SB 26 repealed. That's the root cause of anything. I think that after that, the constitutional spending cap, absolutely. Of course, any bill that somehow limits or makes illegal, whether it be an ethics bill or whatever, to get rid of the binding caucus or to give those of us down there the courage to say, I am not going to be part of something that I have never seen. I'm not going to vote for it. I'm not going to tell you I vote for it. Anything that we can do to limit that, I will certainly be part of. KGB Road, top of my list, needs to be fixed. We need to stop using public works projects and public venues is the wrong word, but public items such as that as a political football. So it's unconscionable that Governor Walker would do what he did. It's almost unforgivable. The families of the people that were killed there should be very, very, in the time period, that thing's been in the works for 10 years. And then he removes funding just about when it was getting ready to start because he was mad at the Valley caucus, at the Valley legislators because they wouldn't vote for his gas line. That's really, really bad. I will never be a part of that. I'm sorry, but I will never be a part of something like that. And I am angered that the Valley legislators, and who knows why, but why it wasn't broadcast more, why people didn't, why the news media didn't know more about it. It's very frustrating. So
we'll see a lot more on that. That's what that Zoom meeting that we were a part of on Monday. That's coming out.
Yep.
I can't wait. I'm getting excited, but I'll let you finish here.
So resource development would be my final one. So right now we have a couple projects that are halfway done and they're just idling there. So big one, Rail Spur, Port McKenzie. It frustrates me that Mayor Berkowitz has the Port of Anchorage to now the Port of Alaska. So the Port of Anchorage, because it's not the Port of Alaska just because the mayor says it is, he just wants to leverage the entire state to fix his problem, which is $2 billion worth of repairs to a port that takes constant dredging and constant care just to keep it up. Our port in the valley, on Port McKenzie, which is in my district, is a much better deep water port, and it needs to be developed. And we need the jobs in the Matsu. And part of developing Port McKenzie is making sure that we can get there, which means KGB Road needs to be finished. The rail spur needs to be finished so we can haul Usabelli coal or timber or whatever it is down there. And resource development needs to be at the top of any legislator's list. Anybody that tells you that they are going to be able to generate more revenue for the state to do what they want to do and doesn't in the next breath say development is... I wouldn't vote for them because what they're talking about is taxes, and we don't want taxes, so we need resource development.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
This has been an excellent one-on-one chat here. It's a real eye-opener doing this.
I bet. It's fun. It's interesting. I like being able to kind of put it all together, so I appreciate everybody that's still watching. You know, all one or two of you. Now I know what a talk show host feels like, wondering how many people are watching.
Well, I'm sure we'll get a few hundred, if not a few thousand, before this is all through off of this video here. Thank you out there in Facebook land. I really appreciate you guys all tuning in today. You have been a wonderful audience. I hope we answered a lot of your questions about Kevin McCabe here and the platform and the candidacy for House District 8. And don't forget to vote. August 18th is coming up here just right around the corner, and it's extremely important that we all get out there and do our part and vote this year. The silent majority is not going to win this thing. Your silence is what got us in this mess in the first place. You silent majority out there, you need to be more vocal. In other words, at the voting booth. Get there, vote. That is all I have to ask for you to do. Now, for the rest of you out there, this has turned into a full-time job for me. I mean, I've literally have turned what I'm doing here on Politadick into a full-time occupation. I need your help. I can't work a full-time job and do this full-time too. It takes money. And I have to make a choice. Do I want to keep on doing what I'm doing here at Politadick and making sure you guys are getting this unfiltered out there, finding out the dirt that mainstream media, our local media, and also our legislators sitting in Juneau don't want you to find out? It takes a lot of work on my part, a lot of hours and a lot of time, and a lot of upgrading equipment. One of the little fancy things you can see is I got my little wireless microphone system here that has helped to improve the sound of being able to talk to people of interviews and one-on-one, and the excitement of that it brings to you. So go to politadick.com, that's POLITICK.com, and donate today. You all have a great day. And one last thing, don't forget to share. Facebook squeals on you if you don't share, so share today. Thanks.